What if everything you thought you knew about the Sahara was wrong? What if the world's largest hot desert wasn't always a desert at all? Imagine this, an endless ocean of sand replaced by flowing rivers, green landscapes, and life everywhere. Sounds impossible, right? But here's the part most people miss. This wasn't millions of years ago. This happened far more recently than you'd expect. So what went wrong? How does a thriving land slowly become one of the harshest places on Earth? And if it happened once, could it happen again? Because the story of the Sahara isn't just about the past. It may be a warning about our future. A desert or a forgotten paradise? Long before the Sahara became an endless sea of sand, it was something almost unrecognizable today. A place filled with water, movement, and life in every direction. Imagine standing there thousands of years ago, not facing heat and silence, but seeing flowing rivers, wide lakes reflecting the sky, and green landscapes stretching far beyond the horizon. Herds of animals moved freely across this land, and early human communities didn't just survive here. They thrived in a rich, natural environment that supported hunting, farming, and settlement. And what makes this even more shocking is that we have proof. Deep in the Sahara, scientists have discovered ancient rock art showing fish swimming in water, cattle grazing in green fields, and people living in places that today are nothing but dry desert. These images are not imagination. They are evidence of a world that no longer exists. But then the question becomes impossible to ignore. How does an entire paradise simply disappear? The answer isn't mystery. It's transformation, a slow environmental shift that took place over thousands of years. Rain patterns changed, water sources began to dry, and what once supported life started to weaken little by little. It didn't happen in a single moment, which is why early generations may have lived through it without fully realizing what was being lost. And that's what makes this story so unsettling. A world can collapse not with chaos, but with quiet change. Today, when we look at the Sahara, it's hard to imagine anything other than sand and heat. But beneath it all, the land still carries the memory of what it once was, like a forgotten chapter written into the earth itself. And now one question remains. If a paradise like this could vanish once, what does that say about the world we live in today? When the Sahara was alive. The Sahara wasn't always a desert. In fact, it was once a world full of life. Vast stretches of green land covered the region, broken by flowing rivers and deep lakes that stretched far beyond the horizon. This wasn't a harsh or empty place. It was a landscape where life had space to expand and exist in balance. Across this land, animals moved freely, following water sources and grazing across rich vegetation. The entire ecosystem worked like a natural system in harmony, where survival wasn't a constant struggle, but a stable rhythm of life. It was a place where nature wasn't fighting to survive. It was sustaining itself. And humans were part of this world too. Early communities settled near rivers and lakes, building their lives around water, fishing, hunting, and forming early societies in what we now call the lost green Sahara. Even today, their presence remains in ancient tools and rock carvings, silent proof that this land once supported entire civilizations. But here's where the story takes a turn. They didn't realize it was disappearing, because change doesn't always announce itself. Rivers that once flowed strongly began to weaken, lakes slowly started shrinking, and over generations, the land didn't collapse in a single moment. It shifted quietly, almost invisibly, until what was once normal began to fade away. And that's what makes this transformation so unsettling. A world this vast, this full of life, didn't end in sudden destruction. It ended through slow change that most people likely never noticed happening around them. So the question becomes unavoidable. How does something so alive begin to disappear without anyone seeing it coming? The Sahara didn't fall. It faded away. The Sahara didn't collapse in a moment. It collapsed in silence. At first, nothing felt wrong. A river flowed just slightly weaker than before. A lake didn't stretch as far as it once did. Rain still came, just not as often. Everything still looked familiar, so nothing seemed broken. This was the first stage of a change no one recognized, but the land was already responding, even if no one noticed. Water sources that once powered entire ecosystems began to lose strength year after year. The environment didn't fail suddenly. It started losing balance piece by piece. And because life continued as normal on the surface, there was no reason to believe anything irreversible was happening. Then came the second stage, normalization. What was once unusual slowly became normal. Less water, drier soil, shorter rainy seasons. Each change was accepted because it still felt survivable. Nothing felt wrong. Because everything still looked familiar. And that's where the danger truly began. Because over time, these small shifts didn't stay small. They accumulated. The system that once supported life was no longer fully stable. But there was never a single moment where everything broke at once. There was no warning bell, no clear turning point, just a quiet weakening spread across generations. And this is what makes the Sahara's transformation so powerful and so unsettling. It wasn't destroyed. It faded through hidden change, so gradual that people likely lived their entire lives without realizing they were witnessing the end of a green world. So the question becomes sharper now. How does something so massive disappear without anyone ever seeing it happen? The moment. A green world started dying. The Sahara didn't slowly become a desert. It crossed a point where it could never go back. That moment is what scientists call a tipping point, the exact threshold where a system stops adjusting and starts collapsing. Before that point, the changes were still reversible. But something fundamental began to shift in the climate itself. Monsoon systems that once brought moisture to the region slowly moved away, redirecting rainfall to other parts of Africa. What had once been a reliable cycle of wet and dry seasons started breaking apart. Then, the effects began to stack. Less rainfall meant weaker vegetation. Weaker vegetation meant the soil could no longer hold moisture. Dry soil meant rivers stopped refilling the way they used to. And once rivers weakened, lakes that depended on them began shrinking even faster. One failure triggered the next, like a chain reaction that no longer needed time. It just needed momentum. And that's why everything began to accelerate. What had taken thousands of years to shift gradually started collapsing in a much shorter window once the balance was gone. The land wasn't just changing anymore. It was losing the ability to support itself at all. This wasn't one single disaster. It was a system failure spread across climate, water, and life, all feeding into each other until recovery was no longer possible. And once that line was crossed, the transformation became permanent. The green regions didn't just fade slowly after that point. They were steadily replaced by expanding dry land that kept growing stronger with every cycle. So, the real question becomes unavoidable. What happens when a world crosses a point it can never return from? The forgotten migration that changed history. When the Sahara crossed its point of no return, it didn't just change the land. It forced entire civilizations to leave. As the environment collapsed, rivers that once sustained life disappeared, and lakes that had supported generations slowly dried out. At first, people tried to adapt, shifting closer to remaining water sources, changing how they survived, adjusting to whatever little stability was left. But that stability didn't last, because the land itself was breaking down faster than human life could adjust to it. And so began a massive wave of displacement, a forgotten migration that unfolded quietly over time. Families were forced to abandon the places their ancestors had lived for generations, not because they chose to, but because staying was no longer possible. Every step away from the shrinking green zones meant leaving behind more than land. It meant leaving behind identity, memory, and everything that defined their way of life. And there was no clear destination, only the hope that somewhere farther away, water still existed, This wasn't expansion. It wasn't exploration. It was survival under pressure. And here's where the impact goes even deeper, because as these groups moved towards surviving river systems like the Nile, populations concentrated in smaller regions. Over time, this shift didn't just change where people lived, it helped shape where civilizations would eventually rise. In other words, the drying of the Sahara didn't just erase a green world, it redirected the path of human history itself. And that leads to a more uncomfortable question. How much of human history is shaped not by choice, but by survival? Life that still exists in the Sahara. The Sahara looks empty, but it is not lifeless. Beneath its endless sand lies a hidden world that most people never imagine. In rare pockets known as oases, water still survives, and where water exists, life quietly follows. Around these areas, plants grow, animals gather, and fragile ecosystems continue to exist in the middle of what appears to be complete emptiness from a distance. But the real surprise is not what we can easily see, it's what survives in conditions that should make survival impossible. Across the desert, animals have adapted in remarkable ways, enduring extreme heat, long periods without water, and environments that constantly shift beneath them. Even beneath the surface, microscopic life has been discovered in soil that looks completely dry and lifeless to the human eye. And then comes the deeper layer of evidence, the physical proof that the Sahara was not always a desert. Underground water systems still exist beneath the sand. Ancient lake beds stretch across vast regions, and fossil remains of aquatic life continue to surface, telling the same story again and again. A landscape that was once filled with rivers, greenery, and balance. So what we see today is not the absence of life, but the remains of a world that once was. A world that didn't disappear completely, it transformed, leaving behind only fragments of what it used to be. And that leaves us with a quiet realization: even in the harshest desert on Earth, life refuses to disappear completely. Could it happen again? Somewhere else? What if the Sahara is not just a story from the past, but a warning we are still living inside today? Because when you look closer at its history, one thing becomes clear: the most dangerous changes are not the sudden ones, but the ones that look completely normal while they are happening. In the Sahara, nothing would have seemed broken at first. Rain still came, just less often. Rivers still flowed, just a little weaker. The land still looked familiar, even as the system underneath was already losing its balance. And that's what makes it so difficult to understand in real time. Nothing looks wrong, while everything is quietly shifting. And if you compare that to today, the pattern feels uncomfortably familiar. Across different parts of the world, there are regions where rainfall patterns are shifting, where soil is drying faster than it can recover, and where ecosystems are slowly losing stability. But in the moment, life continues normally. People adapt, adjust, and move forward because nothing appears to be collapsing. That's the real danger, not destruction, but normalization. Because history shows us that the Sahara didn't become a desert through one dramatic event. It happened through small, repeated changes that built up over time until the system could no longer hold itself together. No alarms, no clear warning moment, just gradual pressure that eventually crossed a line no one recognized in time. And maybe that's the lesson buried inside this story. The biggest changes in Earth's history don't announce themselves loudly. They hide inside normal life until it's too late to ignore them. So the final question isn't about the Sahara anymore. It's about everything around us right now. What if the next major shift isn't in the past, but already unfolding in silence today? The Sahara doesn't end as just a desert in history. It ends as a warning, a reminder that an entire green world didn't vanish in a single moment of destruction. It faded slowly, quietly, in ways so subtle that life continued as if nothing was wrong. And that is what makes its story so unsettling, because the most dangerous changes are never the ones that arrive with chaos. They are the ones that feel normal while they are happening. The kind of change you adapt to, accept, and live through, until one day you realize the world is no longer what it used to be. The Sahara is proof that balance in nature is fragile, And once it is pushed beyond its limit, it doesn't announce the moment it breaks. It simply stops being the same. So when we look at that endless sea of sand today, we are not just looking at the past. We are looking at a reminder that even the most stable worlds can change without warning. And the real question is no longer about what happened to the Sahara. It's whether we are paying attention closely enough to notice what might be changing right in front of us. The Sahara reminds us that even the biggest changes don't always come loudly. They happen quietly until everything is different. So the real question is simple. Are we noticing the changes happening around us before it's too late? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe to Brainy Bites, and turn on notifications for more deep dive stories like this.